Good morning, world.
And good morning, Michigan. Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick on this Wednesday as we greet you on Wildcat Wednesday, presented by Northern Michigan University. Gary Austin standing by in the newsroom. So, Gary, let's talk a little sports, shall we?
All
Jim
right, Rich.
Leland yesterday had to cut his own son. His son was with the Tigers in spring training, and 18 players were cut yesterday, and Jim Leland's son was one of them, his son Patrick.
Well,
That's got to be. It's tough. You talk to a coach, they always say the toughest thing about this job is cutting a player. But this had to be a little special in that regard, huh?
Well, it's a very unique situation. I mean, Rich, you're a sports guy. How often does this happen where, the son of a player or a close relative for that matter, has a chance of playing for someone he knows real well?
Yeah, exactly.
That's unique.
I think,
Yeah.
though, actually, what the one that really struck me was last week when the Edmonton Oilers were in town to take on the Red Wings. Dan Petrie, who pitched for the Tigers in that championship season of 1984, Peaches. His son is an Edmonton Oiler, and I can't think of too many, if any, father-son combinations that involve Major League Baseball and the National Hockey League.
Wow.
That may be a first.
That is true. Let me think about this for a second. I can't think. There are
Right.
a lot of cases where we have, sons and fathers tied to Major League Baseball. That probably happens the most often.
Well,
to a lesser degree, we see it in football. Not very often. How many NHL players can you think of, with the exception of Mark and Marty Howe? Gordie Howe's sons that went on to play in the WHA and
Well,
the
I'll
NHL.
tell you an interesting story, and I can get a plug-in for my book at the same time, The Gods of Olympia Stadium, which is the second best hockey book ever written, by the way.
Of course.
And no, it's not the best. The best is Ken Dryden's The Game.
But you're a very close second.
Well, the reason I say that is I based the book very closely on a baseball book that came out of the 1960s called The Glory of Their Times, which was written by a guy who used to teach economics up the road at Michigan
Lawrence
State.
Ritter.
Lawrence Ritter, exactly. And I came across the book in the library when I was a grown-up and I had some free time. I'd gotten it when I was a little boy. And when I was 12, I didn't think that much of it. But when I read it as an adult, I'm thinking, what a terrific book.
It's a great concept. Lawrence Ritter, 1966, the first publishing date. He traveled around in the early 60s.
Right.
And literally just dropped in on former Major League ball players. Now, these were now it was 1966. And a lot of these guys, not most, but quite a few were still living at the time. So
tough to interview them if they're not.
I beg your pardon?
Tough to interview them if they're not.
Yes, but they were around. So he tracked them down, and he managed to really, draw some terrific story. And this is baseball pre-1920.
Yeah, guys around the turn of the century.
Yeah.
The guy that played center field next to Ty Cobb, for example, Sam Wahoo Crawford, and they tell these great stories. And I thought maybe that would work with hockey players. And so I began interviewing. I guess the first guy I interviewed was Bill Gadsby, who played 20 years in the National Hockey League, and he'd mentioned 3 or 4 guys, and so I'd try and track those guys down. And the thing that struck me, my overarching memory of this is going to be how gracious these people were to me. They didn't know me from Adam. But as soon as I said I talked to Bill Gadsby and your name came up, they said, "Oh yeah, come on over. I'll do an interview with you."
That's
and
neat.
it was just like talking hockey with your grandfather. Yeah. But going back to the father-son connection, Ted Lindsay broke into the NHL in 1945, and had it not been for Lynn Patrick having to serve as an emergency goaltender for the New York Rangers in the late 1930s for 2 periods of 1 game, Ted Lindsay would have been the first player in NHL history to be the son of a former NHL player, because Teddy's dad played in the NHL the first year there was an NHL back in 1916-17, or maybe 17-18. I can't remember off the top of my head.
1917 is when it started. But, so from 1970 to that point, there has never been a father-son connection.
Teddy would have been the first.
Is that right?
Except for, as I say, Muzz Patrick, or Lynn Patrick, actually, having played 1 game in the 1930s.
Wow.
It was, I thought that was fairly amazing. But the thing about it being the second best book of all, hockey book of all time, just as I was wrapping up writing the book, Sports Illustrated published a story called The Top 100 Sports Books of All Time, and The Glory of Their Times was rated, I think it was number 57. So I'm thinking to myself, if I'm rated, I should say, if there are no hockey books that are rated higher than 57, then all I've done is written the best hockey book of all time, right?
Well,
and so
I agree.
So I start going down the list, and there's nothing in the 50s, 40s, 30s, 20s, or teens, and I'm getting a little excited here. I'm thinking I've written the best hockey book ever, because I really did frankly, I stole the idea from Ritter. I just did what he did.
But,
So
but,
it was.
but you know what? No one. But you're the first to come up with that concept and put it to work.
Yeah.
Via hockey.
Exactly. So I'm thinking if it's not as good as Ritter's book, it's kick in close.
Oh,
because
you
I
bet.
really followed his formula pretty closely. Well, anyways, I get to number 9 on the list, and it's The Game by Ken Dryden. I'm thinking to myself, geez, I said to my wife, Jeannie, I said, I read that book. I'm going to have to settle for number 2 because it is good. And then Ken Dryden, Stanley Cup winning goaltender for the Montreal Canadiens, Honor of Canada winner, member of Parliament, general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. This guy didn't leave nothing for anybody.
Yeah, he really got actively involved in politics,
Oh, yeah.
as soon as he left the NHL. But, on Lawrence Ritter's book, a great concept, and for those who are into this sort of thing, a fellow by the name of Donald Honig followed up on Ritter's concept. Now, Ritter stopped about 1920 with his interviewing of players. I mean, they had to play in that era, the dead ball era
Right.
for Major League Baseball. But Donald Honig picked it up from 1930 through about 1955, and he interviewed players. His book is called Baseball When the Grass Was Real. Same concept, just like Ritter and just like your book, but he interviewed ball players from another era.
Right.
So anyway,
The thing that
great
struck
concept.
me actually about Lawrence Ritter's book, and again, I got it when I was a little boy. It was a birthday present one year. And when I read it when I was a kid, it was sort of like, I was a little bit disappointed in it. But when I read it as an adult, the stories were just marvelous. The first chapter, I believe it's Rube Waddell. And he was a semi-pro 17-year-old pitcher for a team in Cleveland. And he gets a telegram one day from John McGraw of the New York Giants, the legendary John McGraw, saying, we want you to come and pitch for us. Go to the train station. There'll be a ticket for you. Meet us in Chicago. Well, Rube Waddell has never been away from home before. So he gets his parents' permission, goes to the train station, and take 4, 5, 6 hours to take a train from Cleveland to Chicago. And train travel in those days, it was you'd get covered with soot en route because they all burned coal, right? Well, he gets to Chicago. It's late at night. He has no idea where the Giants' hotel is. He has no idea where the ballpark is. It's not even Wrigley Field yet. It's pre-Wrigley Field. And he finds himself wandering the streets of Chicago. And he comes upon a firehouse, and the firemen are out on a run. And then you have the pot-bellied stove going in there, and it looks pretty inviting. So he goes in and he lays down by the pot-bellied stove, and he falls asleep. Well, the firemen come back from their run, and they assume he's a bum, and they're going to kick him out. He goes, no, I'm a pitcher for the New York Giants. And they're all like, yeah, sure you are. But they let him spend the night by the pot-bellied stove, and the next day they take him to the ballpark, and to the amazement of the firemen, Waddell is admitted to the park. He's a pitcher for the New York Giants. And then Waddell said, and he had like an 18-year career. Every time he went back to Chicago, he'd go to that firehouse and bring his fireman buddies to the games. That's just a terrific story.
It is, an interesting story, too, about Wrigley Field. Wrigley Field was actually built for the Chicago Federal League team, which played 2 seasons, 1914, 1915, the only serious challenge to Major League Baseball back then. It was built for that Chicago Federal League team.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and when the Federal League folded in 1950 and the Chicago Cubs moved in, and they've been there ever since. We would love to keep talking sports. We got some serious news to get to here.
We got about 2 minutes.
Yeah, let's run through some of the big stuff here, Rich. Emergency financial managers will have new powers thanks to legislation awaiting the signature of Governor Snyder. I know you talked about this a lot yesterday, but yep, as expected, lawmakers have approved this as we knew they would. Now, Governor Snyder is ready to sign it. In other news, we have Michigan seniors very upset, protesting out front of the Capitol
about
again.
About 1,000 yesterday.
Yeah, quite a few. Mm-hmm. They're unhappy with plans that would tax their pensions. Yep, quite a few were seeing Recall Rick placards and that sort of thing. It's not fair. Other signs being seen yesterday. Quite a few.
Did Snyder run on that? I don't recall him giving a campaign speech where he said, I'll tax your pensions at 4.35%. I just don't remember that coming up.
Yeah, what he did say, though, he made it clear that everything was on the table, and that was
well,
one of those
you know
things
what?
that
That's
was
pretty
on the table.
convenient, isn't it? I'd like to see these guys run, telling us some specifics in the future.
Well, I tell you, it's the way things are going. So many cuts that the state is facing right now. You never know what's going to get slashed next, and obviously there are quite a few folks.
Item pricing bill got approved.
I'm sorry?
The Senate approved the item pricing bill?
Yes, that too. That's been okayed. We knew that was going to happen, so now stores will not be required to make sure there's a price tag on everything. They've been complaining for a long time.
Yeah, I bet you that lasts a year or two, and they'll go back to it because you're going to get upset when you go to the store and you don't know how much the peanuts are.
Yeah, the stores contend, though, by doing that, too much business, and it ends up too much commotion to get it done, and the cost as such ends up being passed on to us. So they say overall it's going to be a savings. We'll see how that goes.
We will see. I'll keep an eye on. See, we'll see if food prices go down as a result of this.
In Detroit, a strange find. An intersection, a pile of papers, Rich. Now, they could have fallen out of a passing vehicle. Nobody knows for sure. But a closer look, and come to find out, these are personal medical records, hundreds of them, complete with names, photos, phone numbers, even Social Security numbers, of all things. They've been traced to an adult foster care facility in the Detroit area, and now police are trying to figure out how they got where they did and if any of these things ended up in the wrong hands. This update is service of AmericanMetalRoofs.com. You'll never have to worry about the weather with a beautiful, guaranteed American Metal roof. Learn more at AmericanMetalRoofs.com. That's AmericanMetalRoofs.com.
Always nice chatting with you, Gary.
All right, Rich, you too.
All right, talk to you tomorrow. Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick on Wildcat Wednesdays, brought to you by Northern Michigan University. And Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick as we join you from the American Metal Roofs studio in the shadow of the state capitol. That's one of the hard aspects of actually having this portion of the program on television is when they play nice bumper music like that. I can sort of jam.
Oh, yeah, I was bobbing my head
exactly.
to Pink Floyd there.
Yeah, exactly. I was busting a move over here, and then I remember, well, people on TV don't necessarily want to see that, so you gotta back it off just a little bit. Kyle Malin is here with us from the Michigan Information and Research Service. That sounds like a pretty fancy name.
Yeah, I know. That's why we just call it MERS.
Yeah, well, but then it sounds like a Russian spaceship.
Yeah, or it sounds like a carpet store, one or the other.
Okay, so, but at any rate, you follow the goings-on at the state capitol. It's a good time to be a reporter down there.
Or a tiring time.
Yeah, sure. They had 1,000 seniors, or at least people represented by the American Association of Retired Persons. I hate to say seniors when I associate that with the AARP, since I now qualify. So if you're 50, you qualify for AARP. I don't really consider that to be a senior. But they had 1,000 seniors there yesterday. They were expecting many, many more people than that today for a big protest about, well, I guess all sorts of things.
Yeah, the unions are kind of organizing a long extracted rally today stretching from 12 noon to 6 o'clock. And they're doing that so they can get the teachers in there a little later today. They're not going to skip school to go rally at the Capitol. So if school lets out at 3:30, they can get down there by 4. But the unions are hoping to get as many as 3,000 people, maybe more, down to the Capitol to protest against obviously the budget cuts and the emergency financial manager legislation and other bills.
A little late for that, though.
Yeah, I know. Those bills are already going to the governor.
Yeah.
But they're also talking about some of the other bills that the legislature has taken up. They're counting 30 to 40 bills that they find offensive to their bargaining rights, their collective bargaining rights, that they want to bring to the legislators' attention. So those are the ones that they're going to be focusing on, I think, the most.
It won't be quite as big as what we saw in Madison, especially last weekend when 100,000 people turned out. But it does seem to me, without question, that is the Republican agenda, is to get rid of as many unions as possible.
Well, not necessarily get rid of them, but I mean,
well,
we're talking about scaling back benefits and pay. I mean, that's the key.
Yeah, and if you take away bargaining rights, what's the point of having a union?
Well, they are still going to have bargaining rights, I think, under any legislation that's passed in the Capitol right now. What we're talking about, though, is taking certain things, I think, off the table, such as paying teachers step increases after their contracts expire, not giving them increases during contract negotiations, or project labor agreements. And these are the kind of things that the legislature is talking about right now. It's kind of nicks around the edges, but you get too many bites from mosquitoes and you want to kill them all, and I think that's where the unions are at right now. They're getting a bite here, a bite here, a bite there. They're a little annoyed.
A little bit, yeah. And then the seniors upset about the taxing of the pension benefits.
Yeah, and I think it's because of the dollar amount. If you look at Rick Snyder's entire income tax proposal, I mean, he's getting rid of all exemptions. I mean, he's getting rid of the earned income tax credit. He's getting rid of the exemption that you get on kids. I mean, if you get to claim a kid on your federal return, you won't be able to do that anymore at the state level. But the one involving the pensions is the most expensive. It's the one that will bring in the most amount of money. And I think
900
that,
million, I think, was the number I saw.
yeah, and if the entire number is 1.8 billion, so that's half, right? And so I think that's why the focus is there. And the other focus is we've never talked about it before. You know, we've talked about cuts to the universities and cuts to schools and cuts to revenue sharing. And while all those things are happening this year and at levels that are probably even greater than we saw under Jennifer Granholm, this is so new and so fresh that it's got people riled up anew, and I think that's why everybody's focusing on it.
Well, I think everybody's the other reason is, I mean, one of the things that attracts people to Michigan, God knows it's not the climate, but you know, in terms of our infrastructure, in terms of our higher education system, and in large part because of our public education system, you know, we can turn out the skilled workforce that we're looking for, but you know, the opponents are saying if you cut the education, that's a key thing.
Yeah, you know, it's how you really want to frame it. I mean, the opponents to everything that Rick Snyder's doing is saying that you're dropping Michigan standards down. You're asking us to pay more for less services.
Right.
And if you listen to Rick Snyder's rhetoric back, he's not really debating that. He's saying that we got to hit the rock bottom before we can build ourselves back up. This is kind of ground zero that we're going toward right now. So when you hear the folks saying, yeah, we're going to be paying more for less services, they're actually right. They are. But this is balancing the budget as far as Rick Snyder's concerned. This is what it's called a structurally sound budget that's not being passed with gimmicks, and that's what we got when we, what we've had for the last several years.
Well, when you have home values dropping by a third, in some cases more, when you have a 13% unemployment rate, that kills your tax base.
Well, yeah, so then you're even talking about the locals and the school level, which is where the property tax money all goes, and they're feeling it really hard. And that's where we have problems here at the city of Lansing and cities across the state. You know, how are we paying for our police and fire when we're not getting as much money from the state? We're not getting as much money from our property taxes. It's a real problem.
Yeah, absolutely. What else is going on down the street there, just a few blocks away at the Capitol?
Well, I think really we're focused on what we're going to see at this rally today. And how much impact does it really have? I mean, does it just galvanize the Republicans to have the resolve to pass more of these kind of initiatives, or does it really have any kind of influence at all? You know, the problem that the Republicans face is if they don't want to do an elimination of the income tax exemption on pensions, they don't want to do that, then what? I mean, do they really want to fix the business tax structure here in Michigan? Do they want to get rid of the Michigan business tax, which they said is just as worse as the single business tax that we had back in 2007? If we don't want to get rid of that, then we don't have to do the pension tax, the so-called pension tax. We don't. We can balance the budget just with the cuts to higher ed, K through 12, and the statutory revenue sharing. We can do that. We don't have to touch the pensions. But if you want to improve the tax structure, they say, if you want to bring this big tax cut in, then that's what we have to do, because there's not a lot of other options out there.
The other side of that argument, though, you take the least taxed state in the nation, which therefore would ostensibly make it the friendliest for business, and that's South Dakota. And South Dakota is not exactly teeming with heavy industry and with a lot of business. And I think part of that goes back to what I was talking about earlier, that educational infrastructure that we have built up here in Michigan. They don't have that in South Dakota.
No, you're exactly right. You know, as far as making the tax structure low, I think Snyder's big thing also has always been about making it simple and fair. And you can say that this corporate income tax proposal is both, in that it's low and it's not very complicated. I mean, the whole tax itself is only 29 pages. The bill itself is 29 pages. Now, when you're talking about a bill in the legislature that's incorporating some kind of tax, that's a surprising few number of pages. I mean, that's something I could even sit down and read. You know, anybody could sit down and read that. So it's actually kind of, that part's refreshing. So if it's not 6%, Rick Jones, the senator from Grand Ledge, has suggested, well, maybe 7%, maybe 8%. Maybe we broaden it to other businesses as opposed to just corporations, C Corps. You know, those are a couple different options that we could do, as opposed to just, exploding the entire income tax and flattening it all out.
I would like to go back to when the federal income tax was instituted back in 1913, 1914, somewhere around there. It turns out, I've read, I don't know if it's true, but it sounds plausible to me, that if you made $50,000 in today's dollars, you didn't pay any tax at all. And, the tax code was not exactly 4,000 pages long at that point. I mean, it was pretty simple when it started out, but boy, over the years, you tack on the loopholes and what have you, and it's nobody can understand it. No, short of someone having a law degree and specializing in tax law.
Well, that's the whole thing. You flatten out, let's say, the income tax, and then you create this flat corporate business tax, and then you just see the different types of things just kind of pop up, all these different types of exemptions. And we're hearing that in the House Tax Policy Committee right now as they're talking about making this corporate income tax. What about the brownfield credits? What about these people who want to build on these, decimated, polluted pieces of land? What about the film credits? We've already got something going on here in Michigan. Mitch Albom was in front of that committee yesterday talking about, hey, we've got something going here. We thought this was going to be a 5-year plan. You want to nip it at 3? I mean, before things have really gotten established and built here, that doesn't make any sense. You can make a great argument for any of these exemptions. I mean, there wouldn't be exemptions in there if they didn't have good arguments. And so after a while, it's going to be, if this actually passes, you're going to start seeing these little things start popping up, and maybe not under Snyder's tenure, but the person who succeeds him in office.
Are you going to the rally today?
I'm going to be at the Capitol, so it's going to be unavoidable. I think between this and that, I'm sure I'll be seeing what's going on. The thing is what's going to make it very difficult to count is that since it's so, extracted, 12 to 6, they could give you any number of people that could be there, but they're going to be there at 12, and they'll leave at 1, and then someone comes at, let's say 4, and then they leave at 5.
Right.
How you ever going to know? It's not like they're selling tickets to this thing.
Right, exactly. So how will you cover it, though?
Oh, we'll have people there listening to some of the speeches and talking with the union folks, asking who is there, who's represented, and the speakers, and what kind of message that they're sharing. I mean, that's the whole reason you cover these things, It's
Exactly.
It's not because there's anything new here. You really want to get a number. How many people are upset? What kind of organization was the SEIU, the UAW, the AFL-CIO, the MEA? What kind of numbers were they able to bring here to show their support? And is it as massive as, let's say, the MEA rally that they had back in, 2005 or so, when they were able to get from the Capitol steps all the way to Michigan Ave?
But does it even matter? I mean, we're talking about a union workforce nationwide that now stands at 7% of the total workforce.
Does it matter? I mean, in the context of necessarily voting on the bills, probably not. I mean, they would have to have some kind of really massive turnout.
Right.
And even then, it didn't really make a difference in Wisconsin, did
Right.
it?
Well, we'll see how the recalls turn out.
Well,
But
sure.
I mean, they've lit that fire.
Right, but the thing is that these are hard issues to tackle. I was at that sit-in that they tried to do at the Capitol yesterday. The sleepover that got everybody kind of whittled away, and it's a hard issue to tackle. It's you're out there and you're upset, but it's hard to explain. Emergency financial manager. Well, we already have some. It's such a hard thing to tackle and really get your arms around. It's not like Scott Walker just came into town and said, we're going to get rid of all collective bargaining. We want to make this a right-to-work state. We want to, eliminate unions. They're not talking about any of that. So it's like you're just kind of ticked off about all the little things that are happening through the day and are just generally really ticked off.
Yeah.
As opposed to just that one thing you can point to, tackle to, and get everybody's attention riled up against. That's kind of the problem they got here.
A lot going on up the street. Kyle Malin from MERS, the Michigan Information and Research Service, with us. Thanks very much for your insights.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thanks a lot, Rich.
All right, Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick. We are live from the American Metal Roofs studio. We'll have more for you on Wildcat Wednesdays, brought to you by Northern Michigan University. See, we're all rocking right now. Rachel Chavez, Jordan McCarlton in the studio with us here on, what day is this? It's Wednesday, isn't it? It's the middle of the week. It's the day of the big protest on at the state capitol. By the way, the weather supposed to clear up. We had, I guess we can't speak for the entire state, but here in Lansing it was raining and drizzling and chilly last night. It's supposed to be partly cloudy and 50 this afternoon here in the capital city. Well, gang, our guest is not with us right now. We're supposed to have a guest right now. I've got a show sheet in my hand, but we'll get in touch with Justin Kane, who's going to be talking about the battlefield brawl. We'll do that in the next few moments. So once again, we find ourselves in a situation where we get to vamp just a little bit. So I'm always excited when we get the opportunity to do that. We were talking earlier with Gary Austin about Jim Leland, the Tigers manager, having to cut his own son yesterday. The Tigers sent 18 players to the minor leagues. got to leave the major league camp, guys. And one of them was Patrick Leland, the outfielder, who is the son of Tigers manager Jim Leland. And that had to be, a bit of an uncomfortable conversation.
That's an awkward dinner.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was one of the moves the Tigers made yesterday. They also sent two highly rated pitchers to the minors. Andy Oliver, one of them, and the other, what's the kid named Turner, who got sent down to Double-A Erie, whose first name is escaping me right now.
I think it's Jacob Turner.
He was being talked about by Tigers general manager and president Dave Dombrowski at the Detroit Sports Broadcasters Association annual Tigers luncheon about a month ago. And I have never heard Dombrowski as upbeat about any baseball player as he was about this kid Turner. He apparently is. I mean, you'll hear Sparky Anderson famously saying that so and so is going to, Kirk Gibson's going to become the next Mickey Mantle, for example, that sort of thing. But this kid Jacob Turner, at least according to Dave Dombrowski, is really the real deal.
Well, the Tigers have, I would say, in the last 8 to 10 years, have really made a policy of building up strong, hard-throwing arms in the minors.
You know, they really do. I mean, if you look at that staff, that seems to be what they're all about, power pitching with the Detroit Tigers. But the starting rotation pretty much is all set. And so they have the opportunity to give a young pitcher like Jacob Turner and Andy Oliver. I think he was up for about 10 or 12 games last year. He started a few games for Detroit, but he'll pitch mainly for Toledo this year. Delighted right now to be joined by Justin Kane, who's giving back to the community. What you want to do, I want everybody to go to their computers. I want you to do this right now and go to battlefieldbrawl.com and follow along on your laptops as we talk to Justin Kane, who is behind Battlefield Brawl. And Justin, tell us what it's all about.
Hey, Rich. Well, Battlefield Brawl is a flag football tournament that's for Sparrow Pediatrics. It's a great event. There will be 12 teams out there playing along, and each team will have 2 celebrities, and these celebrities will be people like Tim Mokrakis or Herb Haygood or Jeff Smoker that will be on their team throwing passes, running around with them. It's a great event, a lot of fun, and it ends up raising a lot of money for Sparrow Pediatrics.
How'd you get involved in this? Where'd you come up with the idea?
Well, a long time ago when I was 10 years old, I had a cancerous brain tumor hemorrhage, and no one knew I had it. It caused some great trauma. I was rushed to the hospital. They weren't sure if I was going to make it. I had emergency surgery, and long story short, I eventually made it. And came out of that, went back to school, worked really hard, got through that, went on to the real world, and eventually started my own business, my own video production business, and some other nonprofit work that I do as well. And I'm just so grateful for where I've been able to get, that I want to help Sparrow get even more equipment and even more specialists. So if there's another child that has an injury,
right,
quite like mine, they won't have to go to Ann Arbor or Detroit or even Texas to get all the care they need.
Mm-hmm.
They can stay right here. And
Pretty-
that's why I'm making this happen.
Pretty nice of guys like Smoker and Duckett to jump in and lend their names and efforts to it as well.
Oh, absolutely. TJ is a great friend of mine, TJ Duckett, and he's definitely helped out a lot. He helped me really get it off the ground when it was just a pipe dream. He helped me bring it to fruition, and we raised nearly $12,000 the first year,
Outstanding.
Which is incredible.
Hopefully you can
Yeah.
double it this year, Justin. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for everything you do. Again, it's battlefieldbrawl.com. The event is May 1st. Flag football with some of your favorite Spartans. You get to meet them up close and personal, and it's all, again, for a great cause at Sparrow Hospital. Justin Kane, our guest. Rich Kincaid, your host this morning, and for Michael Patrick, we will take a break. We'll be back with more from the American Metal Roofs studio right after this. And Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick today. Rachel Chavez in studio with us, along with Jordan McCarlton. And waiting to hear from Larry Sorensen, scheduled to jump in here and talk some Tigers baseball with us. We're going to talk about Miguel Cabrera. I read somewhere he's supposed to be arraigned soon, maybe today, on his DUI charge down there in Florida. I can't find anything about it on MLB.com. And I know you might think MLB.com, it would shy away from reporting negative news. It does not. That's the most surprising thing of all the four sports, the four major sports, of all the websites, the official league websites. MLB is far and away the best. In fact, at the end of every story that you see on MLB.com, it says this story was printed without the approval or the supervision of Major League Baseball. They are completely independent when it comes to the reportage. And Jason Beck, who's the writer who covers the Detroit Tigers, does, in my estimation, an outstanding job. We just don't happen to have a Miggy story right now, other than the fact that he is, as the headline says, showing good form at the plate. He started off a little bit slow, but on Sunday he went 3 for 4 with a couple of RBI, which at that point put him on a 6 for 10 run over a 3-game stretch. And then yesterday he hit a solo home run. It was the only run for the Tigers in a 2-1 preseason loss to the Boston Red Sox. So, we can't find anything about Cabrera's difficulties, which are well documented at this point. Again, he faces arraignment in Florida. What do you guys think? He's not being suspended. He's not going into a rehab. There are people out there that think the Tigers are not handling this as a severe enough problem. They're not. The response is too late.
I'm usually of the view to let the legal process play out. I mean, it was such a strange story, the details that have filtered out about the events that happened that night with Cabrera. I mean, obviously, he was well over the legal limit, but, when he was driving, how he was driving, if anyone else was involved, it's not quite clear yet. So I would probably hesitate to make a full judgment.
Well, the restaurant stuff where he threatened a waiter or a manager saying, "I will kill you," it sounded almost, it recalled Gary Moeller, the Michigan coach, getting hammered at that Detroit restaurant in the incident that ultimately cost him his job. Now, I can't compare the relative drunkenness of the two individuals. I mean, we know Moeller was he was just hammered out of his mind. But for Cabrera to go off like that, you have to think, he was pretty much over the limit as well.
I mean, I don't think there's any question that he was pretty boozed up and said some things that I think were pretty far on the ridiculous side. But, it's just not clear to me about, how much of real damage was done, obviously, to his reputation, which had already been somewhat tarnished. But, ultimately, I think people are going to see him play really successful baseball for the Tigers this year. And success tends to be the best deodorant.
Well, I'll tell you, let's shift to basketball. The NCAA tournament technically got underway last night with those play-in games. Clemson won easily, and UNC Asheville won their play-in game. The real games, as far as I'm concerned, well, there'll be 2 more play-in games tonight. The real games begin on Thursday and Friday in the first round of Michigan State taking on UCLA. Michigan is they're playing Tennessee, aren't they?
Tennessee.
Yep. And then Oakland University against Texas. And there's an interesting story out this morning that Oakland coach Greg Kampe was on the phone with the Texas coach, and the Texas coach wanted some advice from Kampe. This was after an Oakland University-Michigan State game. And the Texas coach wanted some advice on how to beat Michigan State, and Kampe said, "Hey, why don't our two schools play?" And the Texas coach said no. Travis Bader, Travis Bader is a player for Oakland University, but the Texas coach said no. We're not going to play you guys. But now they're in the bracket, they're in the tournament, they have to play one another. But I just thought it was interesting that Texas would turn down a game against Oakland University. I don't know if they thought that OU's not big enough or not important enough a school for a team like Texas to play. But he says, no, we're not playing you guys. Well, now he's going to have to play them.
That's just desserts right there.
Yeah.
Hopefully Oakland can settle it on the court.
Exactly. Red Wings are in action tonight. They'll be taking on the Washington Capitals. You have to love the headline in the Free Press this morning on their website. And I quote, Osgood says it's tough to stop Alexander Ovechkin. Hey, hello? You think? This is one of the great players in the National Hockey League. Did I say Osgood? I did. Wings goalie Jimmy Howard knows it's not easy to stop Caps Alexander Ovechkin. The reason I mentioned Ozzy is the fact he's back now. He underwent a groin surgery. I'm thinking mid-January or so, and he has rehabbed. It's been kind of sad seeing him walk around the Joe Louis Arena in street clothes. And I as somebody that plays hockey, I know how frustrating it is when you don't get a chance to play. I've been in situations where I've been asked to come out and skate, and then I'll show up and some other goaltender is there, and I don't get to play. And this is just dropping hockey. Imagine if you don't get to play in an NHL game. It's got to be so much worse. But he's back now.
I think we all know that rehabbing a groin is not something any of us want to go through.
I did go through that once, and I'll tell you what, when you hurt it, it makes the same sound as when you pull a chicken leg off of the chicken. So think about that the next time you hear somebody has sustained a groin injury. And while I'm down writhing in agony on the ice, the other goalie decides to skate 180 feet down to where I'm laying there. And he goes, as I'm down, he goes, "Oh, this happened to me once. It took me 6 weeks to rehab it." How's that helping me? I'll tell you what. We'll take a break. We'll come back with more after the top of the hour. This is MPS in the morning. It is Wildcat Wednesdays, brought to you by Northern Michigan University, and we're coming to you live from the American Metal Roofs studio. Good morning, Michigan. Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick, who will join you tomorrow. A very special edition of MPS in the morning, as Michael Patrick will be coming to you live on St. Patrick's Day from lovely Ireland itself. We want to remind you that today is Wildcat Wednesday, brought to you by Northern Michigan University. Rich Kincaid in studio, along with Rachel Chavez, who's filling in for Amanda K. Wall, and Jordan McCarlton in studio with us as well. And we're joined right now by an attorney and a writer for the Cleveland Plain Dealer, or at least their website, cleveland.com. Bree Zeltner. Bree, good morning. We wanted to talk to you this morning about the man who's in the news, I think, more than he deserves to be, but certainly a troubled character right now, Charlie Sheen.
Good morning, Rick.
Hi, good morning.
This is Elizabeth Kelly. I'm an attorney from Cleveland. I don't write for the Plain Dealer.
I'm sorry. I was
That's
holding.
okay.
I was holding the wrong sheet of paper in my hand. I apologize. I hate when that sort of thing happens.
No,
But,
no, that's fine. That's fine. What would you like to talk about?
Well, let's talk about the situation with Charlie Sheen, if you're
Yes.
prepared to do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's been quite a past couple weeks for him, and from a legal standpoint, it's been intensely interesting. First of all, he threatened to sue CBS, Warner Brothers, and Chuck Lorre, the producer, for $320 million. Then shortly thereafter, he was fired by 2.5 men, and then about 24 hours later, he and his attorney turned around and sued Warner Brothers, CBS, and Chuck Lorre, not for $320 million this time, but for $100 million. And meanwhile, he is taking his show on the road, and he is going to be in Detroit, and he's going to be in Cleveland on April 4th.
How are the tickets selling in Cleveland? He sold out in Detroit in a day.
Yeah, they don't go on.
Okay.
Go on sale until tomorrow morning.
All right, I'm going to get
So
your bio.
before people head out to the St. Patrick's Day
Right,
parade,
I'm going to give everybody
they've
the.
got to go online and buy their tickets.
There we go. I'm going to give everybody your proper bio. We're speaking with Elizabeth Kelly, criminal defense lawyer based in Cleveland, Ohio, specializing in representing individuals with mental illness, including post-traumatic stress disorder and bipolar disorder. She is the host of Celebrity Court on News Talk 1420 WHK in Cleveland, and Elizabeth also a regular on CNN 8 Headline News, True TV, and the Fox News Strategy Room. If you were representing first, does he have a leg in this $100 million lawsuit? Does he have a leg to stand on?
Well, the problem is, what does he do if he goes forward with this lawsuit? Because not only is litigation expensive, and that probably isn't a concern to Charlie, who in the day used to make $2 million per episode on 2.5 men, but he's got to be deposed, and that could be a very, very embarrassing procedure. So my gut reaction is they may just quietly settle the suit, although his attorney, Martin Singer, is very sharp and very shrewd. I don't think he would have filed a lawsuit unless he felt he had grounds.
Does he suffer from bipolar disorder, alcoholism?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask
Yeah.
me that. Lots of people have. Look, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but his strange actions, and I'm being diplomatic, over the past couple weeks could have come from a couple of things. First of all, he could still be on abusing drugs and alcohol, although he is producing clean tests. But, no one has actually saw him take a urinalysis. Think about it. And secondly, his behavior could be reflecting 20, 25 years of serious drug and alcohol abuse. He could be suffering the effects of long-term substance abuse. I don't know. Some people point to the wild look in his eyes and his pressured speech and his seemingly out of control word patterns, his things like winning and warlock and sober lodge and all of those really, really weird phrases as pointing to the fact that he's not all there. I don't know. I wish that instead of visiting the great cities of Detroit and Cleveland, he would follow the advice of some people and just check himself into an inpatient program like Betty Ford, spend 6 months working on his sobriety, come out clean and sober, do a couple mea culpa interviews, maybe on Oprah, maybe on Michael Patrick Shields in the morning, and he would be bigger and better than ever. He's going to make a ton of money on this latest tour, but the question is, how long can he avoid so profoundly offending someone that he is going to be a curse in Hollywood?
What's the appeal here? That is the part that mystifies me. Is it the driving past a car wreck and you can't avert your eyes syndrome?
Well, I don't know. There's that old saying, any publicity is good publicity. But, Mel Gibson is a good study in maybe not all publicity is necessarily good publicity. And I think Charlie is very, very close to that point. Sure,
Well,
he's funny and talented, and some of what he's still doing now is entertaining, but I think it bespeaks a larger problem.
Absolutely. I mean, clearly it does. I mean, you get to, what was he making? $2.5 million an episode?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The show's 2.5 Men. He was making $2 million an episode.
Yeah.
Close
Okay.
enough.
Yeah.
Close enough.
Exactly. Right.
Highest paid actor on television.
Yeah. Exactly. So I mean, I guess why would you throw all that away? That's the part that is mystifying to me.
But,
Well, a lot
but
of it is
in
mystifying.
In his mind, he's not throwing it away. That even though he got terminated from 2.5 Men, he's going on his road tour. Heck, he has almost 3 million people following him on Twitter.
I've got 46.
Oh.
No, I'm happy with that.
I'll try not to follow you as well.
I'll look forward to seeing your invitation, Elizabeth. Are you familiar with Miguel Cabrera's situation? He's the biggest name on the Detroit Tigers, and he got arrested at just before spring training started for drunk driving. This followed by about a year and a half, a situation where with the Tigers in the thick of a pennant race, he was arrested for domestic assault, and he was drunk when that happened as well. Here's a guy that's a very important figure here in Michigan, and he also has got some problems.
Yeah, and what's sad about that is Mr. Cabrera actually was on the wagon for a while, and he underwent treatment, and he cleaned up, and he showed up to training sober and looking good and playing well. And then what happened? And it all comes back to Charlie Sheen. You know, Charlie is saying that he basically willed himself to sobriety at his house under the protection of a sober coach. And I know that there are some people out there who say that if you are strong enough and you are focused enough, you can beat any type of substance abuse. Most of the experts, however, do not agree with that. They say that you have got to concentrate on your sobriety in a focused environment. And even if you do that, and even if you are successful in your treatment program, because of the nature of the addiction, because of the nature of the disease, you, like Miguel Cabrera, could fall off the wagon.
Is there anything
So
that really works out?
That's one of the tragedies here.
Yeah, I just finished a book about Mickey Mantle that was just released called.
I heard about that. It's
Yeah.
supposed to be wonderful.
Yeah, well, it's you're not going to like Mickey Mantle as well after you read the book as you may have beforehand, because he did some awful things, and invariably when he was well under the influence. But this book suggested that the experts in the field think that rehab fails in 60-70% of the cases.
Yeah, but at least it succeeds in 40%.
There
and,
you go,
know,
yeah.
this is addiction, particularly long-standing, long-term addiction.
Mm-hmm.
You probably don't get rid of in one fell swoop.
Right, and Mantle, in his case, although it was near the end of his life, and I think he realized that it was near the end of his life, he went to Betty Ford for 2 weeks, and then he was able to swear off alcohol for the rest of his life. But it turned out it was only 18 months or thereabouts.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And one of the things that I see when I represent people in court on drug offenses is that a judge may give the client probation, but then the client violates the probation by testing dirty again.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be 1 month out, that could be a year out, that could be
Right.
5 years out.
Right.
And what judges don't always understand is you can't always beat it the first time.
There you go. Our guest, Elizabeth Kelly. She is based in Cleveland, and she hosts Celebrity Court on News Talk 1420 WHK in Cleveland. Elizabeth, my apologies for my identification problems at the top.
Oh,
Thanks.
No, it's fine. We had a good time together.
I enjoyed it myself. Thanks very much for joining us, and I look forward to
You
seeing
take
you on
care.
Twitter. All right.
Bye-bye.
Elizabeth Kelly, our guest here on MPS in the Morning. We'll take a break, come back with more from the American Metal Roofs studio. This is the Wednesday edition of MPS in the Morning. And as we join you live from the American Metal Roofs studio in the shadow of Michigan's capital, it's going to be a big day at the Capitol today. Protests are planned. I was looking at a Free Press photo montage of the protests yesterday, where the AARP was the primary sponsor, and 1,000 or so seniors showed up at the Capitol primarily to protest Governor Snyder's plan to tax pension benefits at 4.35%, a move which the governor says will bring in $900 million to state coffers, and the seniors don't want to pay that 4.35% of their pensions, hence the rally yesterday. Today, unions and others will be in downtown Lansing. They're expecting a much larger demonstration, but as we were talking about earlier this morning with Kyle Molina of the Michigan Information and Research Service, he covers the state capitol, says the rally, which begins at noon, will last until 6 p.m. And the reason it's lasting so long is so that teachers don't have to skip school to come to the rally. They can come on over when school is out, but that's going to make it much more difficult to get an exact count on how many people, in fact, turn out today at the state capitol. The latest on the situation in Japan, it's fluid, to say the least. The situation with their nuclear reactor, the reactors continue to catch fire and to blow up. In fact, at one point last night, with a fire burning, the last remaining 50 workers who were inside the plant were told to leave. The radiation levels were too high. This occurred around 11 o'clock our time, Eastern Standard Time, which meant it was early afternoon in Japan. After 4 hours or so, radiation levels went down, and those workers were permitted to return. And as far as we know, workers are are on the scene trying again today to get those reactors under control. The Japanese news service NHK is saying that Japanese police will today attempt to cool the spent fuel pool at the Daiichi number 4 reactor using a water cannon truck. They just can't get close to this thing. The radiation is so high, so there was talk yesterday that they were going to use helicopters, and now a water cannon truck will be employed. Terrible night overnight in Japan, primarily because of the weather. Temperature dropped into the mid and upper 20s, and there were snow flurries. Well, more than flurries. A couple of inches fell in Sendai, as a matter of fact. And you've got people in a situation there that are, homeless. And now the weather has turned cold. It'll warm up by the weekend, but that tended to be a very uncomfortable night for many thousands of people in Japan last night, again, with snow falling and temperatures in the 20s. In fact, the Japanese government reporting that as of this morning, there are 430,000 people displaced by the natural disaster, nearly 500,000 people who are staying in some 2,400 shelters. And they are scrambling right now to build additional shelters to take care of the people who have lost their homes in this disaster. A very unusual thing happened earlier today in Japan. And again, we remind you that Japan is 13 hours ahead of us. So it's about 8, well, it's nighttime there now. It's 8:30 p.m., roughly 8:27 p.m. to be precise, in Japan. And something that almost never happens happened earlier today. The Emperor of Japan, Emperor Akihito. You will recall during World War II, I don't think this is the case anymore, but during World War II, the Japanese people felt their emperor was a god. I don't know if that is the prevailing feeling now, but he almost never goes on television. But he did in this case. He produced a videotaped speech for the Japanese people. NHK TV says this is the first time the emperor has used a video message to convey his feelings to the Japanese people. They say the suddenness of the message and its simultaneous airing on nationwide TV and its content were unprecedented. After the earthquake in Kobe in 1995, which killed more than 6,400 people, all the emperor did was issue a written statement. And again, he was on television yesterday in Japan. And a quote from that address: "The number of people killed is increasing day by day. We do not know how many people have fallen victim. I pray for the safety of as many people as possible. People are being forced to evacuate in such severe conditions of bitter cold with shortages of water and fuel." The emperor continuing, "I cannot help praying that rescue work is done swiftly and people's lives get better even a little. I sincerely hope that we can keep the situation from getting worse. I have received messages of condolence from the heads of state of various countries with kind words that their hearts are with the victims. Allow me to convey the words to the people of the afflicted area." So that from the Japanese emperor in an unprecedented address to the Japanese people just a few hours ago. Joined right now by Congressman Mike Rogers, Republican of Brighton. Congressman, your thoughts on what's going on in Japan and what the United States is doing to help?
Well, it's good to hear your voice. We're sending some help, some rescue teams from around the country that have expertise in rescuing victims from natural disasters. Some of those teams are already on the ground. We are trying to help in any other way we can. Water is another big way. We're as limited as the resources that Japan has, really, in this case, in the sense that they're mustering their folks on the ground to do what they need to do. They're a highly organized society. They have contingency plans for these kinds of things. It's just so overwhelming, the number of problems that they're facing. You can imagine the difficulty.
Absolutely, and the United States has, I believe, 2 aircraft carriers are in the region, standing by to help the USS Ronald Reagan and the USS George Washington, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, no, there is, and we have our Pacific Fleet was up in that direction anyway, and so they directed them over close to the coast, and they're limited to what they can do, but they can provide some medical services, some evacuation type services, some logistical kind of things that that carrier group can provide. So all of that would be at disposal of the Japanese if they need it.
Do you, as a member of Congress, get better information than the citizen at large?
Well, this is so fluid that we had reactor briefings yesterday that we probably get more technical in depth when they bring the engineers in. We kind of walk through what the problem sets are as we know them. And some of our information isn't great when it comes to what's going on at the reactors.
What were they telling you about the situation?
Well, that they don't believe yet that there's a containment wall that if something bad happens in there that contains radiation, they don't believe there's been a breach in that wall yet with all the information that they have. And so the biggest challenge now for the folks who are handling it is try to keep it cool. And so I think I heard you talk about they've got water trucks coming in, they've got helicopters dropping water on it. So they're trying to find a steadier stream of coolant just to keep it cool. And what happens if it heats up, it starts to disintegrate on the inside, and that's what they were worried about.
Did they talk to you yesterday about the possibility of radioactive material getting into the jet stream and finding its way to the west coast of the United States 4 days thereafter? I've seen some graphics to that effect that that could be the outcome, again, if that radioactive steam, that radioactive material gets high enough into the atmosphere.
Yeah, they find the likelihood of that is almost not possible.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of stark difference between all of the folks in the media outlets saying, "Oh, this is coming." When you hear them talk, it's the likelihood of that is tiny. And the worst thing that might happen in the area if the containment wall breaches creates some problem, at least in the vicinity of the facility. And they weren't even convinced that was the case as of yet. And you think about what the difference is, and I know people are thinking, ooh, what about our nuclear power plants here? They're designed differently, number one. And B, think about the facility that we're talking about. It got hit with almost a 9.0.
It was a 9.0, yeah.
Yeah, and then, which caused a tsunami, and then got hit by the tsunami minutes later. I mean, that is just unbelievable. And it's still functioning. A lot of the safety precautions, even in that, are still functioning, including, they think, that protective shield. So, I mean, there is some good news coming out of that.
Well, President Obama
if
says
get it
he's
cool down. I think they can stop any potential leakage.
There we go. The president says he's still backing nuclear power. Do you agree with him on that?
I do. I don't. There's if you want to take carbon out of the air, if you want cheap, sustaining energy, the nuclear energy is the way to go. We have to build them right. We have to do it right. But it today is the cleanest form of energy we can produce that reduces prices. China's doing it, and France has done it for years. We've had a nuclear navy for 50 years. You know, again, the problems they're talking about, a lot of it is speculation of what might happen. When you look at what the facts on the ground, it's not quite that.
Congressman,
where they have talked about.
Thanks so much for your time this morning. We appreciate it. Congressman Mike Rogers, Republican of Brighton, joining us on MPS in the morning. A break and more coming after that. And they do, too. We have a Republican Congressman, Mike Rogers, joining us here on the program, hoping to hear momentarily from State Senator Rebecca Warren, Democrat of Ann Arbor, on all the goings-on at the state capitol, just up the street from us here at our American Metal Roofs studio. I said that badly. I'll try that one again. American Metal Roofs Studio. There we go. No problem there. Delighted to be with you here. I'm Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick this morning, and indeed we are joined right now by Rebecca Warren, Democratic State Senator from Ann Arbor. Rebecca, so much going on in the Capitol. We've got a big demonstration coming up today. There was a fairly decent demonstration, I guess, yesterday with 1,000 people or so showing up. There are people, especially union members, who are upset, and seniors, I must say, who are upset with what Governor Snyder's attempting to do.
Absolutely. I think after he made his budget presentation, in every visit that I've made to different community events in the district that I represent and the folks that have been visiting my office, I feel like beyond the community college folks who got held harmless in his budget, everybody's a little feisty about some of the things he's put in front of us to consider.
What are you most upset about?
Well, I think that the thing that I'm most excited about, and I try really hard, I'm a liberal Democrat from Ann Arbor, but I try really hard to give credit where credit's due, and we're all in this fight together, whether you're on the right or on the left. This is our moment to try to put Michigan really back on the path to prosperity. So I am excited about the fact that I think he is looking very seriously at solving our structural deficit. And ever since I've been elected, and certainly probably before then, we've been fixing Michigan's budget with one-time funding sources, with smoke and mirrors, with gifts from Washington that don't have staying power to really fix the budget. So I'm excited that we're having that conversation. I think the thing that upsets me the most is we're not having a real conversation about, at this point in Michigan's history, what do we want state government to do? What programs and services do we still want the state to provide given limited resources, and how do we want to pay for it? We've accepted some false premises about what size the state budget should be, or what revenue we have to work with, and that's most upsetting to me because we're just fighting amongst ourselves for small slivers of a pie instead of talking about how big the pie should be.
How difficult is it for you now to be in the minority? Are you getting steamrolled?
Well, I don't feel personally like I'm getting steamrolled. I had the opportunity to serve 4 years in the Michigan House in the majority, and I did the chance to chair a committee, and I built really good working relationships with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, and I've had that come back to me. Had a couple of my colleagues even say in public meetings, my colleagues who are now serving in the majority in the Senate, Rebecca, when she had the gavel, she didn't use it to kind of bang on our heads. She let us have our voice. She let our amendments be heard in committee, and so I feel like folks, kind of, we're all in this world together. You treat people fairly, and they usually come back and treat you. I think, obviously there are policy differences. There are going to be places that we disagree, but for the most part, it's nice to have a Senate where minus one person, we've all had a chance to sort of serve together and work together before.
Rebecca Warren, state senator from the Ann Arbor area, our guest right now. What are your thoughts? It was certainly controversial, the Emergency Managers Act, which has now gone to the governor's desk for his signature. A lot of controversy there. A lot of people were concerned about it. How about you?
Absolutely. Very concerned about it. And concerned because really at the heart of this issue, we are vesting an unprecedented amount of authority in the hands of an unelected person who has no obligation to engage the public, can set aside the publicly elected officials who are subject to the Open Meetings Act, who have to deliberate in public and make decisions about what's happening in the community or the school district, and replacing those folks with a person who doesn't have to do that. So I'm very concerned about the ramifications of having an outsider come to a community to have broad authority over not just finances anymore, but the running, the operations of our state, of our school districts, and of our municipalities. That's pretty concerning to me. And the ability for that person to have pretty broad authority to break contracts and change assumptions on people's pension benefits. These are things that are really a real problem for me, because you talk about who the employees are that will be affected. I mean, these are our public school teachers that we vest with the challenge of, raising the next generation, of giving us our future, and our police, fire, and first responders in our cities and counties, to break contracts with them and to say, you've worked your lifetime for us and you were there, and now we're not going to, take care of your health or care, or we're not going to take care of your pension and retirement. Those kinds of things are pretty concerning to me.
Are you going to the rally today?
I'm heading up to Lansing right now to work. We have committee meetings and session, and the rally will definitely be going on all around us, it sounds like. So I've got a lot of folks from my district that have let me know that they're coming up, so I will certainly be in and around to, say hello to who's come up. And this is honestly, this is my favorite part about representative government. I mean, a big part of what we do is to hear from our constituents, have them share their opinions with us on the issues of the day, and I think there's several different communities across the state that are starting to really make it known how they feel about different pieces of the budget proposal that we're considering.
Senator, thanks for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
State Senator Rebecca Warren, Democrat from Ann Arbor, joining us here on MPS in the Morning. It's Wildcat Wednesdays, brought to you by Northern Michigan University, and we'll come back with more of the show in just a moment. Rich Kincaid in for Michael Patrick for you here on this Wednesday. Michael Patrick live tomorrow from Ireland on St. Patrick's Day. I'll be back with you on Friday, which ought to be kind of a letdown, actually, after the big show tomorrow live from Ireland. Time for our Northwood University Leader of the Day. Northwood University promoting free enterprise and celebrating 51 years of producing leaders. We're going to go with Justin Kane this morning. He's the co-owner and the operating manager of Good Fruit LLC, and he's the guy behind that charity touch football game to benefit Sparrow Hospital's pediatric care unit. The Battlefield Brawl coming up on May the 1st. A lot of former Spartan greats are going to be there participating in that. Justin Kane is our leader of the day, brought to you by Northwood University. Bracketology. We had 5 minutes in this segment. Jordan McCarlton here in the studio with us. Let's break it down. We got 32 games. We'll get the winners and losers of. We'll start in the East Regional. The number 1 seed Ohio State against number 16 Alabama State. Ohio State, right?
That's a comfortable
Okay,
one.
George Mason and Villanova. That's an 8-9 matchup.
I actually like George Mason in that game.
Okay, West Virginia and UAB Clemson winner, and that turned out to be Clemson last night. They won it handily to get into the tournament.
And I think Clemson's actually going to upset West Virginia there. It's one of those classic 12-5 upsets.
There you go. Kentucky against Princeton. Got to go with Kentucky there, don't
Absolutely.
you? Xavier and Marquette. I'll take Xavier.
Yeah, Xavier's a good pick there, actually.
Syracuse and Indiana State should be Syracuse.
Yeah, Indiana State's a little frisky, though. That's one of those that you'll keep an eye on if you're a betting man. Probably Indiana State will cover, may not win the game.
All right. Our next matchup, Washington and Georgia. Washington looked awfully good in that Pac-10 tournament.
Washington is the third highest scoring team in the country. I like Washington.
All right. North Carolina and Long Island. No, shouldn't be a contest. North Carolina, the 2 seed, should win that one easily.
Carolina rolls.
On to the West Regional. Number 1 Duke and number 16 Hampton. Duke.
Duke.
Michigan and Tennessee.
Interesting game. I think probably Michigan's going to squeak out a close one, but Tennessee has been the most inconsistent team all year. They've been up and down. They've won some big games, lost some bad ones. Probably Michigan, who's starting to get some mojo rolling towards the end of the year.
Arizona and Memphis. Arizona the 5 seed, Memphis the 12.
I like Memphis in an upset.
Okay, Texas and Oakland. The 4 seed Texas against number 13 Oakland. I like Oakland in the tournament. I think they could pull an upset, but it's a tall hill to climb. But if their hot shooter gets hot, they could pull it off.
Towards the end of the year, they've lost. I think it's 3 out of their last 5. So
there you go.
Oakland could be an upset pick.
Cincinnati and Missouri. That's a 6-11 matchup.
Yeah, I like Cincinnati there. They're a strong team this year.
Connecticut, Bucknell. Connecticut will win that one, right?
Absolutely.
Penn State and I've lost one here, haven't I?
No, you're right. Penn State and Temple. Is
Oh,
the
there
next
we
game
go,
of the bracket. I actually like Temple there.
Really, Penn State's been playing so well of late.
They have, but they've expended so much energy just to get into the tournament. I think at this point Temple's going to win.
Steve Fisher and San Diego State taking on Northern Colorado. It'll be San Diego State in
Absolutely.
that one. All right, over in the Southwest, Kansas and Boston. That's 1 versus 16. We'll all go with Kansas. UNLV and Illinois. Should be UNLV. Watch how HBO's got a nice special out on Jerry Tarkanian, a documentary. I watched that the other night. Pretty interesting stuff. Vanderbilt and Richmond, 5 versus a 12.
A lot of people are picking Richmond here. It's been a very popular 12-5 pick, but I actually like Vanderbilt.
All right, no spiders in this one. Louisville, number 4 against number 13 Morehead State. Should be Louisville. Georgetown against the winner of the USC VCU game, which is tonight. We'll take Georgetown in that one. Purdue against St. Peter's. Purdue, the number 3 seed. We'll go with them. Stop me if you disagree.
No, you're good.
Texas A&M and Florida State. That's a 7-10 matchup.
I like A&M. Chris Singleton not likely to make a big contribution.
Notre Dame and Akron. Notre Dame, the 2 seed. Akron, the 15. The Irish will roll. And then on to the Southeast Regional, the top seed Pittsburgh taking on UNC Asheville, which won the play-in game last night. 1 versus 16, got to be Pittsburgh. Butler and Old Dominion, an 8-9 matchup, always tough to pick.
Yeah, a lot of people are picking Old Dominion. I think Butler's still a good pick, though. They've got some strong team players left from last year.
Kansas State and Utah State. Kansas State 5 and Utah State the 12 seed.
Another good 12-5 upset pick. I think Utah State wins here.
Wisconsin versus Belmont. 4 versus 13. I've never heard of Belmont.
They're another popular.
Could they be a Butler this year? Because what did Wisconsin score against Penn State? 33 points?
Yeah, but both those teams play such a slow, grinded out style. I actually don't think that'll impact them at all. I like Wisconsin to win here.
St. John's and Gonzaga. Yeah, I almost have to pick Gonzaga because they've got the tournament history. They've got, they must have 15 tournament upsets in their history.
I like St. John's here, though. They have had such an interesting year. I don't know if you know, but Gene Katie's on the bench for St. John's.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I think he's going to have a real impact in the tournament.
Brigham Young and Wolford. 3 and 14. BYU's the 3 seed. They lost their star player.
They did Jimmer, though. Jimmer Fredette's an NBA
Boy,
player.
he is great, isn't
That's
he?
usually
Boy,
enough
what
to
did he
get
score
you
the other night? 47 or something?
Yeah,
Jeez.
52, I think.
Yeah, 52? Yeah, that was
yeah.
pretty. I must have turned it off early. Pretty good player. UCLA and Michigan State, the one everybody's watching here. I say go State.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then the final one in that Southeast Regional, the number 2 seed Florida and the number 15 seed USC Santa Barbara.
I think Florida wins here. They're not going to make a long run. I think Michigan State's upsets them in the next round.
All right. There you have it. 32 games in about 4 minutes. And if you were following along, your brackets are now filled out. And blame Jordan when it all falls apart for you.
Prepare to lose your money.
Okay, there you go. So that's our bracketology. We're going to take a break and be back with you with more live from the American Metal Roofs studio. Rich Kincaid, Rachel Chavez, Jordan McCarlton, all with you here as we bring you MPS in the morning. A break and then more after this.
Not a worry and a